conservative to my students. I worry, it's not so much that, I worry a little bit about being balanced. I worry a little bit about all the left-wingers that we have in so many of the other departments, and I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be an ideologue. I don't want to stand up and preach free market, even though I believe in it. I've listened to some of the things that you said today. I think one of the things that really struck me is this idea of marginalism, that we can't eliminate all government, even though we would like to. We can't have a revolution. We can't overturn the present administration, even though they're not warming the cockles of our hearts. Okay? I worry about dismantling our regulatory system one step at a time. I'm not sure that would work. There are three themes that I want to talk about today. One of them is poverty and redistributive policies. I think I'll be lecturing the choir when I say that I think that most of our anti-poverty programs, most of our redistributive programs are very counterproductive. I'll get to that in a moment. Second theme is the mountain of regulatory bureaucracy that we have to deal with. Many of the liberal whinings about the adverse impact of greed, and they always use the adjective capitalist greed, as opposed to the other kinds of greed, the commissars and bureaucratic greed, and right. So it's always capitalistic greed. I think about that, and I wonder, right? Greed, capitalistic greed, is the best kind of greed because we know that it can be translated into positive outcomes. It doesn't always, and I wonder why. And so that's the second thing I want to pursue. The most basic thing, and I think you can even find it here a little bit, is that we've gotten so accustomed to surrendering our freedoms a little bit at a time. We've got so accustomed to letting the government do things that it has just kind of taken over. I was trying to think the other day, it was earlier in the week, what would be appropriate for me to talk to you guys about today. And of all places, I'm in a, don't tell anybody, I'm in Pilates class. And one of the participants of the class was whining about a recent mosquito attack. And she was sporting these pretty little red welts all over her legs, and saying how bad they were and how much they itched. Well, the instructor this just came out automatically. And here's what she said. Listen to this carefully. The government ought to pay you. For feeding, ready for this, its wildlife. Write that down. The government ought to pay you for feeding its wildlife. Now, when I was your age, the one thing that we would let the government do would be destroy mosquitoes. That was a public good. And it made sense for free men and women to contribute to a government so that they can kill the mosquitoes. Now, thanks to the green people who are too yellow to admit that they are red, our mosquitoes have become wildlife. And our wildlife is owned that sentence. Remember that sentence. And just list all the offensive things that you find in it. And be a little bit introspective. Because you probably say things like, not you, but people that you're close to, people you feel are moderates, free market people. We say this all the time. I confront this in my classes when I deal. You all know about this subject of externality, the great excuse for government to intervene in the private sector. So when I introduce the topic of externality, what comes up? Well, I invite students to give me examples, and they always very quickly pick smoking. So we should tax cigarette smoking. And I know what's coming. So I say, why? Well, is it secondary smoke? And I say, well, if you tax smoking, a lot of people smoke in private. A lot of people don't necessarily expose you to their smoke, and I admit that smoking can be. No, that's not it. Why do people who smoke impose costs upon the rest of us? You know that answer. Through the healthcare system. We're going to have to pay for their cancer. So when they smoke, they're imposing costs upon us. Well, in a very convoluted way, I suppose that's true. Because we've allowed the government to take over the healthcare system. Or at least that's what we seem to have in mind. So your assignment here. Keep your eyes and ears open and listen to people making statements like the mosquito statement. Okay, when you leave here, remember the mosquitoes. Okay? And listen to people saying things like that. And I'm not just talking about the liberals. I'm talking about you guys. Be careful. Okay? I want you each to catch someone else in your group saying something like that and see how much this has become a part of our thought process. I haven't even gotten anything down here. On the subject of poverty and distribution, I wanted to call your attention to this book. Edgar Browning, entitled Stealing from Each Other. Subtitle, How the Welfare State Robs Americans of Money and Spirit. This is a book that I would recommend every one of you to read. Now, there are some good things and bad things about this. The first half of this book is wonderful. It exposes some great myths about poverty and discrimination. The second half, there's some things about it that don't like, and I've heard the theme come from some of you today. On page